Getting a little bit deeper into the Divinity School address, we'll pick a few things up from here and then leave some for discussion time on Blackboard. But we've read William Ellery Channing's likeness to God. He takes likeness one critical step further. Look at this particular quote. If this isn't something designed to raise the hackles of the Divinity School faculty, I don't know what is. If a man is at heart just, then insofar is he God. I can only imagine the veins on the temples and foreheads of the faculty members throbbing, people having apoplectic fits, maybe even foaming at the mouth at hearing something of this nature. This is basically as close to blasphemy as it gets if you're a Unitarian or anybody else. But even a Unitarian would find this somewhat blasphemous. If a man is at heart just, then insofar is he God. You're God when you're good. Is essentially what he's saying. The second thing that strikes me as being very, very powerful and important: truth must be received intuitively. He keeps harping on this extremely important. Think about the implications that this fact, or this allegation, I should say, this contention, has on educational institutions. Truth has to be received intuitively. Others can confirm your knowledge of truth, but to establish truth in yourself, you have to experience it directly. Quote, "Truly speaking, it is not instruction, but provocation that I can receive from another soul. What he announces, I must find true in me or reject." So if the fountain of truth is not secondhand educational knowledge that you receive from some professor or teacher, then you have to ask, what's the function of educational institutions? Right? I mean, bottom line, the only reason that you would go to college, the only reason that you would go to school is to confirm something you've already learned on your own anyway. It is as close to a de facto argument against organized education as it is an explicit de jure argument against organized religion. A third point that you might kind of consider here, and he talks about this: the purpose of the address is to show you two errors that you all, students, faculty especially, administration of the Divinity School, are perpetuating. Number one, historical Christianity. It forces you to become dependent upon institutions rather than upon yourself. Now, what he means by historical Christianity is essentially Christianity as it has been practiced throughout history, which is to say, you go to churches, you join churches, you receive formal religious instruction, you read scripture, and so on and so forth. That, he says, has forced people to become dependent upon institutions rather than to rely upon themselves. And that's a problem, because we don't want that, he claims. The second error that you all, meaning Harvard's Divinity School. And remember, these guys are sitting back there. The reason they're so PO'd about all this is that they think of themselves as the most progressive divinity school in all of America. What do you mean coming up here, telling us how backward we are? Oh my gosh, do you not realize how unbelievably progressive we have? I mean, we are known for being the most progressive group out there. And you've got the temerity to come here and tell us we're all a bunch of backwards people. But Emerson says your problem, folks, is not only your emphasis on historical Christianity, but you ignore the possibility of perpetual revelation. Now, what is perpetual revelation? This is what he's talking about in nature, where he says you need to go out and experience it yourself, meaning spiritual truth yourself. Stop reading about spiritual revelation and go experience it. Stop reading about other people's wonderful spiritual awakenings and go have one. Perpetual revelation means that revelation is always possible to any of us at any time. It isn't something special reserved for a handful of people who lived thousands of years ago in the Middle East. So he says that what the Divinity School and other organized religion is doing is you're ignoring perpetual revelation as the possible source of truth. And instead, truth to you is something historical, something in the past, something that's fixed or static. It's not something that's organic. It's not something that's ongoing. Now, these people are super upset that he's saying these things at a divinity school. I mean, essentially what he's saying is, you guys need to dismantle this joint. you need to shut down the divinity school. When you ask a guy to come and give the address for the divinity school graduates, and you tell them that they've wasted their time, and that the institution that you graduated from and that they're graduating from and all the people teaching in it are just a bunch of time wasters, this is just not going to go over terribly well. However, did you not know who you were inviting? Emerson might say. I left the ministry. Did you not ask me why I left the ministry? I left the ministry because I don't believe in A, historical Christianity, or B, religious institutions. Clearly you do, or you wouldn't have come here. Maybe some of you don't. If you don't, then listen to what I have to say, because this is my experience. One of the things that he offers us is this wonderful extended example that's worthy of quotation here. I won't do it too much at length, but it is a famous piece. It is his case in point, if you will, an illustration of how the Christian church has, in his mind, gone cold. It's the story of the cold preacher on the snowy day. This is actually a real live recollection of his from his journals. He went to hear Barzillai Frost give a sermon. And of course the play, he's got a private joke here with Frost and how cold it was outside and how cold the preacher was. There are no doubt one or two in the audience that probably knew who the preacher was and kind of snickered to themselves on the implied pun here. But, the man's name was Barzillai Frost, and here's the passage from here that we want to look at here. He says, he goes and finds goes to a church here. He says, I once heard a preacher who sorely tempted me to say I would go to church no more. Men go, thought I, where they are wont to go, else no soul entered the temple in that afternoon. This guy was one of the worst preachers he'd ever seen. A snowstorm was falling around us. The snowstorm was real, the preacher merely spectral. And the eye felt the sad contrast in looking at him, and then out the window behind him into the beautiful meteor of the snow. He had lived in vain. He had no one word intimating that he had laughed or wept, was married or in love, had been commended or cheated or chagrined. If he'd ever lived and acted, we were none the wiser for it. The capital secret of his profession, namely, to convert life into truth, he had not learned. Not one fact in all his experience had he yet imported into his doctrine. This man had plowed and planted and talked and bought and sold. He'd read books. He'd eaten and drunken. His head aches. His heart throbs. He smiles and suffers. Yet was there not a surmise, a hint in all the discourse that he had ever lived at all. Not a line did he draw out of real history. The true preacher can be known by this, that he deals out to the people his life. Life passed through the fire of thought. But of the bad preacher could only be told from his sermon what age of the world he fell in, whether he had a father or a child, whether he was a freeholder or a pauper, whether he was a citizen or a countryman, or any other fact of his biography. It seems strange that the people should come to church. That, in essence, is Emerson showing you what was going on, according to him, is that here are these guys, they study theology, but they don't know anything about God. They study doctrine and dogma, and they don't know anything about life. And he says that's the problem. It's a torpid snake. It's frozen, like the preacher is frozen. There's nothing about him that inspires anything. And that's what he wants to do. He says, if you think you can do that within the church, go ahead. But I'm challenging you to think outside of the church, outside of this building, the Divinity School, as a box, and see what the possibilities are for spiritual growth outside of that. Getting a little bit deeper into the Divinity School address, we'll pick a few